Alright guys, so yesterday there was a shooting at the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C. during a reception the American Jewish Committee was holding for young diplomats. I was up all night with some of my journalist friends trying to find more information about this person, and boy oh boy did we find it. I think at this point we have found the entirety of his digital footprint, so I'm going to explain to you guys how we found him, how he was able to openly talk about carrying out acts of terrorism on social media without being suspended, taken off, flagged by the FBI, etc., etc. His victims were Yaron Lischinski, a 30-year-old who had just bought an engagement ring for his girlfriend Sarah Milgram. She was 26. They were both killed in this attack. After the shooting, the suspect, Elias Rodriguez, ran into the museum. Bystanders said that he was in shock. They took him in thinking that he was a victim. When the police arrived, he pulled out a keffiyeh and chanted "Free Palestine."
Outside! No. Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
As he was carried out, witnesses say he chanted, "There was only one solution, Intifada revolution," a chant that bears striking resemblance to Hitler's final solution.
I did see somebody run in. The security guard happened to let this guy in. I guess they were thinking that he was a victim. And he was covered in rain. He was clearly in trauma. He was in shock. And, some of the people at the event brought him water. They sat him down. "Are you okay? Were you shot? What happened?" And he's like, "Somebody call the cops, bring the cops in." So about 10 minutes later, when the cops actually came in, he said, "I did this." He said, "Sir, I'm unarmed." He put his hands up. He grabbed a red keffiyeh out of his pocket and started the Free Palestine chants. There's only one solution, Intifada revolution.
An intifada is an Arabic word for revolution. There's been 2 intifadas in Israel. Both have resulted in the deaths of hundreds or thousands of Jews. In the early 2000s, the second intifada was carried out. Jihadists bombed public buses, bars, grills, shopping malls, school buses, schools, anywhere you'd find civilians and nowhere that you'd find the military. So let's get into how we found him. First, we found his LinkedIn. We tied him to this photo. We now knew that he lives in Chicago and he works or worked for a company called History Makers, which then led us to this photo. Ari Hoffman was able to find him in a 2017 Party for Socialism and Liberation magazine, the PSL. They host protests all around the country. I deal with them regularly. And there he was from almost a decade ago, marching for BLM in the early days of the movement.
So I'm sorry that the audio quality is probably so bad, but I didn't notice this until I was editing, looking for an image or a screenshot of Elias Rodriguez in the PSL magazine when I discovered that they took it down. Now if you look for that 2017 magazine cover with Elias Rodriguez in it, it's a 404 cannot be found message. And what's interesting is not only was Elias featured in the cover of this magazine, he was also quoted as an active member of the PSL. I messaged the Chicago PSL last night looking for information on Elias, and they did not respond, but they clearly know that he was involved with their organization.
What's important though is now we have a history and 3 photos of this guy. I conducted a reverse image search and was able to find his Clubhouse account. Initially, I thought this wasn't going to bear many fruit, but it ended up being one of the most important discoveries we made, I think. Through Clubhouse, we found that he was involved with a group called Red Line, which is an organization that talks about socialist issues, climate change, water scarcity, and held a voice space about hacking the Air Force. But the fruit that this really bore was a 4th photo of Elias Rodriguez and a new username, Kyoto Loather. I searched every platform for this username. Reddit. I searched Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, everywhere. It bore no fruit. But here's where the pieces start to come together. Travis Hawley, who is a cyber threat and open source intelligence analyst, was able to find his Spotify account. On Spotify, he had his favorite ever playlist, which had a song or album cover about killing all cops, among other things. But what was really important about this Spotify discovery was the profile picture linked to the Spotify. And here's where the pieces all come together. My friend and journalist Angela Vanderploym was able to find a Twitter account bearing a very similar username to the one we found on Clubhouse with the same profile picture that Travis found on Spotify. Instead of Kyoto Loather, it was Kyoto with a D, Leather, with that little lobster with the COVID mask. Here we found his manifesto. It was captioned, "Escalate for Gaza, bring the war home. He was also just recently talking about how the New York Times building should be taken out with a truck bomb and then it should be bombed again. He called for death to America. Now remember, Angela van der Ploem found this Twitter. But what she found very interesting is she sounded the alarm on terrorist activity in Chicago. Bridgeview Mosque, which was holding a rally led by a man who was formerly investigated by the FBI for ties to Hamas and the PFLP. Elias Rodriguez responded to Angela by saying, "Cry more, Zio-Nazi," indicating his support for this terrorism. He was also on Twitter talking about shooting people. That was just after Luigi Mangione got locked up. One user said somebody should shoot someone else. Violence is an acceptable part of reality. Elias Rodriguez responded by saying, "Agreed. Violence does not have to happen, but if it does, then it should." And what's also very alarming is on the posts about bombing the New York Times and about shooting people, there are people saying, "Absolute fucking legend." Based. This guy is a based legend. Thank you, legend. He's also on Blue Sky telling people to kill themselves. This is the part of the video where I want to talk about how this is able to happen. How can you openly talk about committing acts of terrorism on Twitter and nothing happens? Nobody investigates you, nothing. Because these people are always saying things like escalate for Gaza, violence is justified, resistance is justified when people are occupied, blah, blah, blah. You know the gambit. There is only one solution, Intifada revolution. How can you get away with saying stuff like that? Openly calling for violence, talking about shooting people on X. The way you get away with it is everybody says it. If everybody says it, every time somebody says Intifada, we should be allowed to shoot people as an act of resistance, bomb the New York Times, those become seen as hollow threats. They're not taken seriously. The law regarding those threats is not enforced against those people, and thus there is no recourse. They continue saying these things. The hollow threats go unchecked, and the real threats go unchecked as well. Again, laws are only as good as they are enforced. If they're not enforced, they don't exist. It is illegal to make threats of violence, regardless of whether you plan on going through with them or not. So because there's so much escalation, bring the war home, student intifada, violence is justified, blah, blah, whatever, the actual threats fall by the wayside because there's no way to discern through them who's actually intending to carry out acts of terror and who isn't. His language is identical to the people I deal with every day. And that's how he was able to get away with it. He could talk openly on social media about his plans to bring the war home and to kill people. The FBI or other intelligence agencies weren't able to pick up on it because there's so much of that chatter going on the internet. It is dangerous. And I'm not saying we should police people's speech. If you criticize Israel, you shouldn't be thrown in jail. But if you make threats to bomb the New York Times or bring the war home, maybe you should be looked into. And if we continue to not look into those people, this will continue to happen, and the people who actually intend to carry out these acts of violence will have a cloak, and that needs to be put to an end. I hope this information was useful for you guys. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment what you thought of this down below, and I will see you guys in the next one.